My entire childhood was a diagnosis. I didn't have a personality. I had a collection of symptoms. I wasn't a kid. I was a patient. My mother wasn't just a mom. She was a saint, a warrior, a tireless advocate for her chronically ill son. At least, that was the story she told. And for 20 years, it was the only story I knew. The truth is, my mother's greatest creation wasn't me. It was my illness, an elaborate, all-consuming work of fiction. And when I finally discovered the lie, I didn't just close the book, I burned it. My earliest memories are not of playgrounds or birthday parties, they are waiting rooms. The smell of disinfectant, the crinkle of paper on an examination table, the low murmur of adults talking about me in words I didn't understand. I remember the taste of chalky, bubblegum-flavored medicine. I remember the feeling of being fragile, a little glass doll that could break at any moment. My mother was the curator of my sickness. She had binders, meticulously organized, filled with what she called her symptom journals. Headaches on Monday, stomach cramps on Tuesday, a mysterious rash on Wednesday. She spoke a language of medical jargon she'd learned from late-night internet forums. She would talk about my leaky gut, my chronic fatigue, my undiagnosed autoimmune disorder. The doctors were always stumped. They would run tests, draw blood, take x-rays, and the results would always come back the same. "He appears to be a healthy boy," one specialist told her, baffled. My mother would just shake her head with a sad, knowing smile. "You're not looking hard enough," she'd say. "You don't see him on the bad days." And there were always bad days. A 10th birthday party I had to miss because of a sudden, debilitating flare-up. I remember lying on the couch hearing the faint sounds of my friends playing outside while my mother tearfully explained on the phone to another parent how brave I was being. She was a phenomenal actress. My life was a fortress of her design. No contact sports, no sleepovers, no school trips. I was the boy with the perpetual doctor's note, the one who sat on the sidelines during gym class, the one who was always leaving early. The other kids didn't bully me, they just pitied me. I was a ghost in the hallways of my own youth. And my mother? She thrived in the reflected glow of my fragility. She was the hero of the tragedy she had authored. She was the president of a local support group for parents of children with rare diseases. She organized fundraisers, bake sales for Alex's medical fund. Our community saw her as a paragon of maternal sacrifice. They brought her casseroles, they offered her prayers, they admired her strength. She was never more alive than when she was describing how close I was to death. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. Her reality was my reality. I believed I was broken, that my body was my enemy. I learned how to speak her language, to describe my phantom pains with the right words, to perform my role as the sick child with a quiet, sad resignation. It was the only way I knew how to get her love. Her love was conditional, and the condition was my illness. The biggest battle of my life wasn't with a disease. It was with my mother over college. The idea of me leaving, of moving 3 hours away to a university was, in her words, a death sentence. "You can't manage on your own, Alex," she'd said, her eyes welling with tears. "Who will take care of you? Who will make sure you take your medicine? You're too fragile." For the first time in my life, a spark of defiance inside me flickered. I didn't want to be fragile anymore. I wanted to be normal. I fought for it, with a strength I didn't know I possessed. And miraculously, I won. She finally, tearfully, relented, framing it as the ultimate sacrifice, a mother letting her sick child chase a foolish, dangerous dream. The day I left for college, she packed me a box. It wasn't filled with snacks or new towels. It was a massive plastic tub containing my pharmacy. Bottles and bottles of pills, vitamins, herbal tinctures, and a laminated color-coded chart detailing my complex medication schedule. It was a physical manifestation of my illness, a portable prison she was sending with me. The first month of college was a revelation. I was surrounded by people my own age who didn't know me as the sick kid. I was just Alex. I was still cautious, still following the medication schedule to the letter, still living in the shadow of my diagnosis. And then one Tuesday, I ran out of one of my pills. A little beige capsule I was supposed to take for my chronic digestive issues. I had a paper due, and I forgot to call my mother to have her mail me a refill. I felt a surge of panic. For years, I'd been told that missing even a single dose could trigger a catastrophic relapse. I braced myself for the inevitable pain, the cramps, the nausea. I waited, and nothing happened. The next day, I still felt fine. In fact, I felt good. The constant low-grade stomachache I had for years was gone. A wild, terrifying thought began to form in my mind. What if, on a whim, a quiet act of rebellion, I made a decision? I took the big plastic tub of medications, shoved it into the back of my closet, and I stopped taking everything. I told myself it was just an experiment. I would give it a week. The first few days were racked with anxiety. I was a tightrope walker, convinced I was about to fall. But I didn't fall. I soared. The constant fatigue that had been my lifelong companion began to lift. The brain fog I thought was just a part of me began to clear. I woke up in the morning feeling rested. I had energy. I went for a walk and then a jog, and I didn't feel the phantom aches in my joints. It was like a fog I hadn't even known was there was finally lifting, and I was seeing the world and my own body for the first time. I wasn't fragile. I was strong. The following Monday, I walked into the University Health Center. A kind-faced doctor in her 50s named Dr. Evans listened patiently as I recited my long, convoluted medical history. The laundry list of rare diseases, the endless symptoms, the failed treatments. I could see the skepticism in her eyes, but she was professional. "All right, Alex," she said when I finished. "Let's start from scratch. We'll do a full workup. A comprehensive physical, a full blood panel, the works. Let's see what's really going on." A week later, I was sitting in her office again, my hands clammy, my heart pounding. She walked in holding a thick file, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking directly at me, her expression a mixture of confusion and deep, profound concern. She sat down, folded her hands on her desk, and took a deep breath. "Alex," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I've gone over every test we've run. I've reviewed your blood work, your organ function, your inflammatory markers, and I've consulted with 2 other specialists." She paused, and the silence in the room was absolute. She said, "According to every piece of empirical medical data we have, you are in perfect health." I just stared at her. The words didn't compute. Perfect health? Me? "In fact," she continued, leaning forward slightly, "your vitals are better than perfect. You're a textbook example of a healthy 20-year-old man. I don't have a medical explanation for the history you've described. None of it lines up with what I'm seeing here." I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I felt a dizzying, terrifying vertigo, as if the entire foundation of my life had just turned to sand. 20 years of my life had been a lie.
I wasn't a patient. I was a victim.
The weeks that followed were a quiet, cold fury. I was no longer a patient. I was an investigator. The target of my investigation, my own life. I went online and found the forms. With my signature and a copy of my new student ID, I was legally entitled to my entire pediatric medical history. I sent out the requests to a dozen different clinics and hospitals, the ghosts of my childhood. The files started arriving a week later. Thick, heavy manila envelopes filled with 2 decades of my life, documented in the detached clinical language of doctors. I spread them out on my dorm room floor, and I began to build my case. It was all there, in black and white, a chronology of deceit. I saw the pattern my mother had so expertly woven. Every single symptom, from the debilitating migraines to the mysterious joint pain, was listed as self-reported by mother. There was never any empirical evidence, no positive tests, no conclusive scans, just my mother's word, taken as gospel. I saw the notes from doctors growing increasingly frustrated. Patient presents as healthy and asymptomatic. Mother, however, is insistent on further exploratory testing, one wrote. She had doctor shopped for years, moving on to a new specialist the moment one started to question her narrative. She had built a fortress of medical ambiguity, and she had imprisoned me inside it. But the most sickening discovery wasn't in the medical files. It was in my own memory. I remembered the fundraisers, the Alex's Angels t-shirts, the donation jars in local stores. It hadn't just been about attention and control. It had been about money. I spent a weekend on a deep dive into the internet. I found the websites for 3 different medical assistance charities for families with sick children, charities my mother had been actively involved in. I found old archived newsletters with my picture in them. Help brave Alex in his fight against a debilitating mystery illness. I didn't know how much she had received, but I knew with a certainty that made me feel ill that she had turned my manufactured suffering into a profitable enterprise. My childhood wasn't just a lie. It was a fraud. A long, meticulous, and lucrative con. And I was the star product. The rage I felt was so pure, so absolute, it was clarifying. There was no room for doubt, no room for nostalgia. My mother had not just manipulated me, she had abused me, medically, emotionally, and financially. I knew I couldn't confront her. It would be her word against mine, and she was a professional victim. She would twist the story, paint me as an ungrateful, mentally unstable son, and she would be believed. No, a direct confrontation was her arena. I had to choose a different battlefield, one where the evidence spoke for itself. My mother's performance had relied on an audience, the doctors, the neighbors, the community. My revenge would be to give her a new audience, a professional one. I drafted a detailed anonymous report. It was cold, clinical, and factual, written in the same detached language as the medical files that now defined my past. I laid out the timeline, the pattern of deceit, the financial discrepancies. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't need to. The facts were 1,000 times more damning than any accusation I could write. I attached my dossier, The complete medical history, the new health report, the evidence of the fraudulent fundraising. Then I sent the entire package in an anonymous, encrypted email to two places. The first was to the National Center for Munchausen by Proxy, an organization that specialized in investigating and providing resources for cases just like mine. The second was a single email BCC'd to the fraud departments of the three charities she had taken money from. The subject line was the same for all of them: formal report of suspected medical child abuse and financial fraud. I hit send. And then I let go. I didn't have to fight her anymore. I had given the truth to people who were trained to recognize it. The system, for once, could do the work. I blocked her number. I blocked her on social media. I sent a single short email to my father, who I now realized was either a willing accomplice or a fool. I know the truth about my childhood. I am safe and I am healthy. Do not contact me. I threw myself into my new life. I joined a running club. I went hiking. I felt the simple, profound joy of a body that worked, a body that was strong. I was no longer a patient. I was an athlete. A month later, I saw a single cryptic post on my cousin's Facebook page. It was vague, but I knew exactly what it meant. Please pray for our family. We are going through an unimaginable and difficult time. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt quiet. The quiet of a storm that had finally passed. I learned later, through the grapevine, that an official investigation had been launched, that my mother was facing charges, that her world, the one she had so carefully constructed around my sickness, had crumbled to dust. Last spring, I ran my first 5K race. As I crossed the finish line, my lungs burning, my legs aching, I was grinning. I wasn't just running a race. I was running away from the ghost of the sick little boy I was never meant to be. I was running towards a future that was, for the first time, completely and utterly my own. My mother had spent 20 years trying to convince me I was fragile. She was wrong. My greatest strength wasn't enduring her abuse. It was surviving it. And finally, outrunning it.